The dust had settled thick on everything in Cedar Falls that autumn of 1876, coating the window sills and porch railings like rust-colored snow. Clara Bennett stood at the well behind their weathered cabin, drawing up another bucket of muddy water that would need straining twice before it was fit to drink. At 18, she had her mother's delicate features but her father's stubborn jaw, and both served her well in this unforgiving land. The drought had been merciless. 3 months without proper rain had turned their small plot of corn into brittle stalks that rattled like bones in the wind. The potatoes had withered in the ground, and their last milk cow had died 2 weeks prior, her ribs showing through her hide like the ridges of the distant mountains. "Clara!" Her father's voice cracked across the yard like a whip. Samuel Bennett emerged from the cabin, his face gaunt beneath his battered hat. Once a proud man who'd brought his family west with dreams of prosperity, he now looked as defeated as the land itself. She set down the bucket, wiping her hands on her faded calico dress. "Yes, Papa?" "Come inside. Girl, we need to talk." The cabin's single room felt smaller than usual. Her father sat heavily at their rough-hewn table, his hands clasped before him. Clara had seen that look before, when he'd told her that her mother wouldn't be coming back from the fever, when he'd sold their good horses for seed that never grew. "I've made an arrangement," he began, not meeting her eyes, "with a man named Eli Morgan." Clara's heart stuttered. She'd heard whispers of that name at the general store, when the women thought she wasn't listening. Eli Morgan, who lived alone up in the Rocky Highlands 40 miles north. Eli Morgan, who'd shot 2 cattle rustlers dead and left their bodies for the buzzards. Eli Morgan, who hadn't been seen in town for near on 2 years. "What kind of arrangement, Papa?" Samuel's weathered hands trembled as he finally looked at her. "He's agreed to take you as his wife. In exchange, he'll provide us with supplies. Grain, preserved meat, 2 horses, enough to see me through winter and get a new start come spring." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "You're selling me?" "It's not like that," Samuel said quickly, but his voice lacked conviction. "You'll be a proper wife, with a home and protection. Morgan's got a substantial spread up there, plenty of cattle. You'll want for nothing, except my freedom." The words came out bitter as alkali water. "Freedom?" Her father's laugh was harsh. "What freedom is there in starving, in watching everything we've worked for turn to dust? At least with Morgan, you'll have a chance." Clara wanted to rage, to throw the clay pitcher against the wall, to run out into the vast emptiness and keep running until she disappeared. But she did none of these things. She was Samuel Bennett's daughter, raised to be dutiful and strong. Her mother had been dead 4 years, and in all that time, Clara had kept their household running, kept her father fed and clothed, kept hope alive even as it withered like their crops. "When?" she asked quietly. "Day after tomorrow. Jeb Tucker's taking a load of supplies up that way. He's agreed to carry you along." 2 days. 2 days left of the life she'd known. That evening, Clara walked to the edge of town where the widow Martinez lived in a small adobe house. The old woman was mixing herbs when Clara knocked, her lined face creasing with concern at the girl's expression. "Ah, mija," she said softly. "I heard the talk. You've come about Eli Morgan." Clara nodded, unable to trust her voice. "Mrs." Martinez gestured for her to sit. "I knew him, before. When he was younger. He'd come to town regular-like. Quiet boy, but not unkind. Had a smile that could light up a room, when he chose to use it." "What happened to him?" The widow's eyes grew distant. "The frontier changes men, child. Some it makes stronger. Others—" She shook her head. "There was trouble with a band of renegades. 5 years back, Morgan was part of the posse that went after them. When he came back, he was different, harder. The wound in his leg never healed proper, but I think the real wounds went deeper. They say he killed men. He did. Men who tried to steal what was his. Out here, that's the law. Mrs." Martinez reached out and took Clara's hands. "But killing changes a man. even when it's justified. He built that cabin of his way up in the highlands, where the wind howls like lost souls. Been alone ever since. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I'm frightened. Of course you are. Any sensible girl would be. The widow squeezed her hands. But you're stronger than you know. Clara Bennett, I've watched you these 4 years since your mother passed. You've got steel in you, underneath that gentle way. Maybe that's just what Eli Morgan needs. The next day passed in a blur. Clara packed her few belongings, her mother's Bible, 2 dresses, a silver hairbrush that had been her grandmother's, the quilt she'd made with her mother before the fever took her. She stood for a long time at her mother's grave, marked by a simple wooden cross that the wind and weather had already begun to wear smooth. I don't know what to do. Mama, she whispered. You always said to trust in Papa's judgment. But this, how can this be right? The wind gave no answers. Dawn came gray and cold. Jeb Tucker's wagon waited outside, loaded with barrels and crates. The old teamster helped her up onto the seat beside him, his rheumy eyes kind but pitying. It's a fair piece to Morgan's place, he said as they pulled away. 2 days if the weather holds. Clara didn't look back at her father. She couldn't. The first day's travel took them through familiar territory. The flatlands dotted with sagebrush and juniper, the distant mountains blue as dreams on the horizon. They stopped at noon by a brackish stream to water the mules and eat cold biscuits. Jeb told stories of his younger days, trying to distract her, but Clara barely heard them. As they climbed into the foothills on the second day, the landscape changed. The road, such as it was, became a rough track winding between massive boulders and stands of lodgepole pine. The air grew thin and cold. Clara pulled her shawl tighter, watching eagles circle in the vast sky. Morgan's place is just beyond that ridge, Jeb said as the sun began to sink. He knows we're coming. Saw him in town last month. First time in an age. That's when your PA must have made the arrangement. Clara's stomach clenched. In moments, she would meet the man who had bought her like livestock. They crested the ridge, and there it was. A solid log cabin built against a sheltering cliff face. Smoke rising from the chimney. A barn and corral stood nearby, and she could see cattle grazing in a meadow below. It was isolated beyond anything she had imagined. The nearest neighbor probably 20 miles away. As Jeb's wagon rolled into the yard, the cabin door opened. Eli Morgan stepped out, and Clara's breath caught. He was tall, perhaps 30 years of age, with shoulders broad from years of hard work. Dark hair fell past his collar, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. But it was his eyes that held her, gray as winter ice, cold and assessing. He moved with a slight limp, favoring his right leg, but there was still power in his frame, danger in his stance. He said nothing as Jeb helped her down from the wagon. Those frost-gray eyes took in everything, her worn dress, her small bundle of possessions, the way her hands trembled despite her efforts to still them. Miss Bennett, he said finally. His voice was deep, roughened by disuse, not welcoming, not cruel, simply acknowledging her existence. Mr. Morgan, she managed. Jeb unloaded a few supplies onto the porch, clearly eager to be gone before full dark. I'll be back through in a month or so, he told Clara. If you need anything sent to your PA, she won't, Morgan said flatly. The old teamster climbed back onto his wagon, gave Clara one last sympathetic look, and drove away. She stood in the gathering dusk, alone with this stranger who was now her husband in all but ceremony. Morgan turned without another word and walked back into the cabin. After a moment, having nowhere else to go, Clara followed. The interior was spartanly furnished but clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a rifle mounted above it. A table and 2 chairs, a shelf with a few books and supplies. Through a doorway, she glimpsed a bed. Just one. Your things can go in the corner, Morgan said, adding wood to the fire. Supper's ready. They ate in silence, beans and salt pork, hard biscuit, bitter coffee. Clara could feel him watching her, those cold eyes giving away nothing of his thoughts. When she finished, she began clearing the dishes out of habit. "Rules," he said suddenly. She paused, hands full of tin plates. "You don't go beyond the meadow without me. You don't touch my guns. You don't ask about my business. You keep the house and help with the stock when needed." He stood, his size making the room feel smaller. "Do that, and we'll get along fine. And if I don't..." The defiance slipped out before she could stop it. Something flickered in those gray eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or respect. "Then you'll learn why folks in Cedar Falls whisper my name." He limped to the doorway of the bedroom, paused. "You'll sleep out here tonight. There's blankets in the chest." The door closed behind him with finality. Clara stood alone in the main room, listening to the wind howl outside and the fire crack in the hearth. Somewhere in the darkness, a wolf called to its pack, the sound lonely and wild. She was 40 miles from home, trapped with a man who seemed more stone than flesh, bound by her father's desperation and her own sense of duty. Pulling out her mother's Bible, she tried to find comfort in the familiar words, but the pages blurred with unshed tears as the reality of her situation settled over her like a shroud. Outside, the Wyoming wilderness stretched endless and unforgiving beneath the cold stars, and Clara Bennett, soon to be Clara Morgan, had never felt more alone. The first week passed in a blur of fear and exhaustion. Clara woke each dawn on her makeshift bed of blankets near the dying fire, her back aching from the hard floor. Eli Morgan was already gone by then, out tending his cattle or mending fences, leaving only coffee warming on the stove. She learned his routines through observation. Since he rarely spoke, he rose before first light, worked until full dark, ate what she prepared without comment, then disappeared into his bedroom. The only sounds in the evening were the pop of the fire and the scratch of his pen as he updated his ledgers. Clara threw herself into the work. She scrubbed the cabin from top to bottom, organized the meager supplies, patched holes in the curtains with scraps of fabric. She discovered a neglected garden plot behind the cabin and spent hours clearing weeds, though it was too late in the season to plant anything. The rules he'd laid down that first night hung over her like storm clouds. She tested the boundaries carefully, venturing to the edge of the meadow to gather late wildflowers, always aware of how isolated she was. The nearest help was a 2-day ride away, and she had no horse, no gun, no knowledge of the trails. On the 8th day, she found him struggling with a calf tangled in wire near the barn. His bad leg had given out, leaving him on one knee in the mud, cursing under his breath. Without thinking, Clara rushed to help. "Get back to the house," he growled, not looking at her. "Don't be foolish." She knelt beside him, ignoring the mud soaking her skirt. "Hold the calf steady. I'll work the wire free." For a moment, she thought he might physically push her away. Then the calf bawled pitifully, and practicality won. He held the animal while she carefully unwound the barbed wire, her fingers bleeding by the time she finished. The calf scrambled free and bounded toward its mother. Eli tried to stand, but his leg buckled. Without asking permission, Clara ducked under his arm, taking some of his weight. "Lean on me. I don't need... Pride won't get you to the house. Lean on me." He did, grudgingly, and she helped him inside. He collapsed into a chair, his face gray with pain. Clara could see the old wound through his torn trouser leg, an ugly, puckered scar that had healed poorly, the muscle beneath damaged. "Let me look at it." "No." She met his glare steadily. "Infection could cost you the leg entirely, or your life. Is your pride worth that?" Something shifted in his expression. Slowly, he rolled up the trouser leg. Clara had helped her mother tend injuries before. She heated water, found clean cloth, and gently cleaned the area where the old wound had reopened. Eli sat rigid, jaw clenched, but he didn't pull away. "This happened in the Indian trouble?" she asked softly, trying to distract him from the pain. "Comanche Lance," he said through gritted teeth. "Went clean through. Field surgeon wanted to take the leg. I convinced him otherwise." "With your winning personality?" To her surprise, His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "With my colt." She wrapped the wound carefully with strips torn from a clean petticoat. "You need to rest it. Stay off it for a few days." "Can't. Stock won't tend themselves." "I'll do it." He looked at her sharply. "You don't know the land, don't know the animals. Then teach me." She stood, wiping her hands on her apron. "Unless you'd prefer to lose the leg and be truly helpless." For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Eli leaned back in his chair. "The brown mare in the corral is gentle. Name's Buttercup, previous owner's choice, not mine. Take her to check the water troughs in the north pasture. Count the cattle if you can. Should be 43 head. It was the most he'd spoken to her at once. Clara nodded and turned to go. "Miss Bennett." She paused at the door. "Thank you." The words seemed dragged from him, but they were sincere. Clara felt something ease in her chest. Over the following days, she became his legs. He directed her from the porch, teaching her to read the signs of sick cattle, to check for predator tracks, to mend simple breaks in the fence. Her hands blistered and her muscles ached, but she found satisfaction in the work. Slowly, the ice between them began to thaw. Eli still kept his distance, still retreated to his room each night, but he began to speak more. Teaching her about the ranch loosened something in him. "See how that heifer's standing apart?" he said one afternoon, pointing from the porch. "She's close to calving. Needs watching." Clara shaded her eyes, studying the animal. "How can you tell?" "Way she holds herself, the restlessness. You learn to read them. Like people?" He glanced at her, those gray eyes unreadable. "Cattle are simpler than people." That night, Clara woke to the sound of voices. No, one voice, Eli's, rough with anguish, coming from behind his closed door. She lay still, listening to his nightmare unfold in broken words and groans. Part of her wanted to go to him, but she remembered the rules. Don't ask about his business. So she lay in the dark, listening to him fight demons she couldn't see. The next morning, he looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes. Clara set coffee before him without comment, but when she turned away, he spoke. "I'm sorry if I woke you." "You didn't," she lied. He knew it was a lie. She could see it in his face, but he seemed grateful for it nonetheless. As the days shortened toward winter, they developed a rhythm. Clara rose early to start breakfast. They ate together now, planning the day's work, while Eli's leg healed. She took on more of the outside chores, growing confident on horseback, learning to move the cattle with whistles and calls. In the evenings, she discovered he could read and had a small collection of books. She asked, hesitantly, if she might borrow one. "Help yourself," he said, gesturing to the shelf. "Previous owner left them. Never saw much point, but..." "But?" he shrugged. "Gets quiet out here." She chose Ivanhoe, settling by the fire to read while he worked on his ledgers. After a while, she became aware he was watching her. "My mother loved this story," she said. "She used to read it aloud when I was small." "You miss her?" It wasn't a question. Clara nodded, throat tight. "How long?" 4 years. Fever took her. She was strong right until the end. Clara traced the book's spine. "I think she held on as long as she could, knowing Papa needed looking after. And now he sent you away." There was something in his voice. Not pity, but understanding. Clara looked up to find his eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. "He did what he thought best," she said quietly. "Survival makes us do hard things." Eli turned back to his ledgers, but not before she caught something vulnerable in his expression. One night, a nightmare worse than the others. Clara heard a crash from his room, then a cry of pain. Without thinking, she rushed to his door. "Mr. Morgan? Eli?" A groan was her only answer. She pushed open the door. He was on the floor beside the overturned nightstand, tangled in sheets, his eyes wide but unseeing. The nightmare still had him. She knelt beside him, careful not to touch. "Eli, you're safe. You're in your cabin. The fight's over." He blinked, slowly focusing on her face. For a moment, naked anguish showed in his eyes. Then the walls slammed back up. He pulled away, struggling to stand. "Get out! You're hurt! Get out!" Clara fled, her heart pounding. She'd seen inside his defenses for just a moment, seen the pain he carried, and it had terrified him. The next day, he couldn't meet her eyes. They worked in tense silence, the fragile trust between them strained. That night, Clara made his favorite stew and fresh bread, a peace offering. He ate mechanically, still not looking at her. Finally, she couldn't bear it. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have entered your room." "No, you shouldn't have." His voice was flat. "You were in pain. I only wanted to help. I don't need help." He stood abruptly. "I've been alone 5 years. I know how to handle my own demons." "Do you?" The words escaped before she could stop them. "Because from where I sit, they're handling you." His face darkened. For a moment, she thought he might strike her, or throw her out into the cold night. Instead, he turned on his heel and stalked outside, leaving the door hanging open. Clara sat at the empty table, wondering if she'd finally pushed too far. Outside, she could hear him in the barn, the crash of tools being thrown. She cleaned up slowly, then prepared for bed, certain he'd demand she leave come morning. But as she was banking the fire, he returned. He stood in the doorway, snow in his hair, looking older than his years. "My demons are mine to bear," he said quietly. "But you were kind to try." He paused, struggling with words. "I'm not used to kindness anymore." Clara's heart ached for him. "Everyone needs kindness, Mr. Morgan." "Eli," he said roughly. "If we're to make this arrangement work, you should call me Eli." It was an olive branch, small but significant. Clara took it. "Then you must call me Clara." He nodded once and retreated to his room, but he left the door slightly open. And that night, when the nightmares came, they were quieter, as if knowing someone listened made them easier to bear. Winter arrived with a vengeance. The first blizzard struck in early November, transforming the Highland Valley into a white wasteland. Clara woke to find snow piled against the windows, the world outside erased in swirling white. Eli was already up, stoking the fire to a roar. "We'll be trapped for days," he said without preamble. "Maybe longer. Hope you're not prone to cabin fever." She wasn't, but as the hours stretched into days, the small cabin began to feel smaller. They rationed conversation like food, each retreating to separate corners. Eli carved a piece of wood with slow, methodical strokes. Clara mended clothes and reread Ivanhoe until she could recite passages from memory. On the third night, with the wind howling like wolves at the door, Clara couldn't bear the silence anymore. "I was 6 when we came west," she said suddenly. Eli looked up from his carving, but said nothing. She took it as permission to continue. "Mama didn't want to leave Missouri, but Papa had gold fever. He was certain we'd strike it rich in California." She smiled ruefully. "We made it as far as Wyoming before the wagon broke an axle. Papa took it as a sign we should stay." "No gold in Wyoming," Eli observed. "No, but Papa said the land was gold enough." For a while, it seemed he was right. The homestead prospered. Mama planted a garden that was the envy of Cedar Falls. Then came the drought of '72. I remember. Lost half my herd that year. Clara looked at him in surprise. He'd never mentioned being in the area that long. Then the fever came. She continued softly. "It took so many Mrs. Hutchins, the Brewster children, Mama. The doctor said it was the bad water, but I think Mama was just worn down. The frontier asks too much of women sometimes. Asks too much of everyone," Eli said quietly. They lapsed into silence, but it was a different quality than before. Companionable rather than strained. "Your turn," Clara said after a while. "My turn? I told you my story. It's only fair." He set down his carving, a horse beginning to emerge from the wood. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. "Came out from Tennessee after the war," he said finally. "Nothing left there. Parents dead, farm burned, found work on a cattle drive. Ended up here. He stared into the fire. Built this place with my own hands. Every log, every stone. Had plans then. Big plans. What kind of plans? His jaw tightened. Foolish ones. Clara waited, patient as she'd learned to be with him. There was a woman, Sarah. The name seemed to pain him. Daughter of a rancher down in Cheyenne. Pretty as a spring morning and twice as sweet. I was going to marry her. Bring her here. Raise a family. What happened? The Comanche happened. Band of renegades raiding across the territory. I joined the posse that went after them. His hand moved unconsciously to his damaged leg. We found them. Lost 3 men in the fight. I took the lance through my leg, but we won. Came back a hero, they said. But not to Sarah? His laugh was bitter. She took one look at me, blood-stained, limping, something dead in my eyes, and I saw her realize what life with me would mean. She was gone within a week. Married a shopkeeper in Denver, last I heard. Has 3 children now. I'm sorry. Don't be. She made the smart choice. This is no life for a woman. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. Yet here I am. Not by choice. No, she agreed. But I'm here nonetheless, and I'm managing fine. He looked at her then. Really looked at her. She was thinner than when she'd arrived, her hands rough from work, but there was strength in her spine that hadn't been there before. Yes, he said slowly. You are. The storm raged for 2 more days. They began to talk more freely, sharing memories of better times. Clara told him about her mother's singing, how she'd made even the hardest days bearable with a hymn. Eli spoke of Tennessee summers, fishing with his father, the taste of his mother's blackberry pie. On the 5th night, Clara found herself shivering despite the fire. The cold had seeped into the very walls. She'd piled every blanket she could find on her makeshift bed, but still she shook. Eli emerged from his room, taking in her situation with one glance. Without a word, he went back and returned with a thick buffalo robe. This should help. Won't you be cold? I've survived worse. But an hour later, she could hear his teeth chattering from the other room. Pride warred with practicality, and practicality won. She gathered her blankets and knocked on his door. This is foolish, she said when he opened it. We'll both freeze from stubbornness. He stared at her, and she could see the battle in his eyes, propriety versus survival. I'll stay on my side, she added, just sharing warmth, nothing more. Slowly, he stepped aside. They arranged themselves carefully on opposite sides of the bed. The buffalo robe and blankets piled over them both. Clara lay rigid, acutely aware of his presence, the heat of him just inches away. Clara, he said into the darkness. Yes? Thank you. She smiled, though he couldn't see it. We're going to survive this winter. Eli Morgan, both of us. The storm broke the next morning. Eli was gone when she woke, already outside checking the stock. Neither mentioned the night, but something fundamental had shifted between them. They worked together to dig out the barn, locate the scattered cattle, repair the damage. When Clara slipped on ice and fell hard, Eli was there instantly, lifting her with surprising gentleness. Are you hurt? Just my pride. But she didn't pull away from his supporting arms immediately. And he didn't let go. That evening, as she prepared supper, he brought out a small wooden box. I want to show you something. Inside were photographs, daguerreotypes yellowed with age, a stern-faced man who had Eli's jaw, a woman with kind eyes, a younger Eli, clean-shaven and smiling, standing beside a horse. Your family, he nodded. All gone now, but I kept these to remember there was a time before the darkness. Clara finished softly. He looked at her sharply. Yes. She touched the photograph of his mother gently. She had a gentle face. You have her eyes. She wouldn't recognize what they've become. I think she would. Clara met his gaze. I think she'd see her son still fighting to find his way back to the light. Eli's breath caught. For a moment, the walls dropped entirely. and she saw raw hunger there, not for her body, but for the hope she offered. Then he pulled back, closing the box with shaking hands. "It's late." But that night, he left his door open wider, and when the nightmares came, Clara began to hum softly, one of her mother's hymns. The sound drifted between the rooms, and gradually, his breathing eased. In the morning, he said nothing, but he'd left the carved horse on the table beside her breakfast. It was beautiful, captured mid-gallop, wild and free. "It's lovely," she said when he came in. "It's yours, if you want it." She picked it up, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "Why a horse?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Because you're not broken. Despite everything, your mother, your father selling you to a stranger, this hard life, you're still not broken, still running." Tears pricked her eyes. "Neither are you, Eli. Wounded, maybe, but not broken." He turned away, but not before she saw moisture in his own eyes. That night, another storm rolled in. Without discussion, they shared the bed again, still careful not to touch. But in the deep of night, Clara woke to find his hand covering hers where it lay between them. She didn't pull away. "I'm sorry," he whispered in the darkness, "for being cruel when you arrived, for making you sleep on the floor, for—" "Hush!" She turned her hand to lace their fingers together. "That's past. I don't know how to be gentle anymore. Clara, I've forgotten. Then I'll remind you. Every day. If I need to." His hand tightened on hers. "Why? You don't owe me anything. Your father's debt. This isn't about my father anymore." The admission hung between them, dangerous and true. Neither spoke again, but they held hands through the night, that simple touch and anchor against the storm both outside and within. When morning came, everything had changed, though neither quite knew how to name it yet. The peace of winter was shattered on a clear December morning. Clara was feeding the chickens when she heard horses approaching. Several of them. Her heart lurched as she recognized Jeb Tucker's wagon, but he wasn't alone. 3 riders accompanied him, and even from a distance, she could see their hostile postures. Eli emerged from the barn, rifle in hand but held low. His face had gone cold and hard. The gentle man who'd held her hand in the darkness replaced by the dangerous stranger she'd first met. "Get inside," he said quietly to Clara. "No." She moved to stand beside him. "We face this together." He glanced at her, and something flickered in his eyes. Surprise. Perhaps even pride. Then the riders were upon them. Clara recognized one immediately. Tom Hartley from Cedar Falls, who'd tried courting her last summer. His face twisted with disgust as he took in her worn dress, her work-roughened hands. "So it's true," Tom spat. "Sam Bennett's daughter, living in sin with a killer. We have an arrangement," Eli said evenly. "Legal and binding. Not that it's your business." "Everything in this territory is our business," said another rider. Older, with a sheriff's star pinned to his coat. "Had complaints about you, Morgan. Folks saying you're holding this girl against her will." Clara stepped forward. "That's not true. I'm here of my own accord." Tom laughed bitterly. "Your own accord? Your father sold you like cattle. Everyone knows it. Traded you for supplies like you were nothing more than property." The words hit like physical blows, each one true. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks, shame and anger warring in her chest. "Maybe she was property," the third rider said with an ugly grin. "But looks like Morgan's already broke her in good, got her defending him like a loyal dog." Eli moved so fast Clara barely saw it. One moment, he was still. The next, his rifle butt had connected with the man's jaw, sending him tumbling from his horse. "Watch your tongue," Eli growled, "or lose it." The sheriff had his pistol half drawn. "Now, Morgan, Sheriff Daniels." Clara's voice cut through the tension. "These men came onto private property and insulted me. Mister, Morgan defended my honor, as any gentleman would, unless the law's changed. That's his right." The sheriff looked at her more closely. "Miss Bennett, "Begging pardon, but is it true? Your father made a deal?" "My father was desperate. We were starving." She lifted her chin. "He did what he thought best, but I've chosen to stay." "Chosen?" Tom's voice was incredulous. "Clara, this man is a killer. He's got no heart left, no soul. Come back with us. I'll marry you myself. Proper-like. Save you from this shame." For a moment, Clara remembered Tom from before. His clean hands, his easy smile, his little farm near town where she'd have neighbors and church socials and a normal life. Then she looked at Eli, standing ready to fight them all for her. This man who carved her horses and shared his painful memories and held her hand through the darkest nights. "I appreciate your concern, Tom," she said quietly. "But I'm where I choose to be. You're addled." Tom's face flushed red. "He's done something to you, put you under some spell. The only spell is called kindness." Clara interrupted. "Something you might not recognize, given your current behavior." The fallen rider had struggled to his feet, blood streaming from his mouth. "Let her rot then. Deserves whatever she gets. Lying with a monster." This time Clara moved first, stepping between Eli and the man. "The only monsters I see came riding in here this morning. Now get off our land." "Our land?" The sheriff's eyebrows rose. "Not married proper, are you?" Heat flooded Clara's face, but she held her ground. "That's also none of your business. Maybe it should be," the sheriff mused. "Living in sin, causing scandal. Maybe I should take you back for your own good. Try it." Eli's voice was death itself. "See how far you get." The sheriff's hand tightened on his pistol. For a moment, violence hung in the air like smoke. Then Jeb Tucker, who'd been silent throughout, cleared his throat. "Seems to me," the old teamster said slowly, "that Miss Clara looks healthier than when I brought her here. Fed, clothed, safe. That's more than she had in town." He looked at each man in turn. "Also seems to me that what goes on between two grown folks ain't nobody's business but theirs." "You condone this sin, old man?" Tom demanded. Jeb shrugged. "I seen plenty of marriages blessed by preachers that were meaner than any arrangement here. If they want to stand before God and man, that's their choice. If not, still their choice." The sheriff holstered his weapon slowly. "This isn't over. Morgan, people are talking. They don't like it." "People have been talking about me for years," Eli said. "Never bothered me before." "What about her?" The sheriff jerked his head at Clara. "You don't care what they say about her?" For the first time since the confrontation began, Eli seemed to falter. He glanced at Clara, and she saw real concern there. "They can say what they like about me." Clara said firmly, "I know the truth of my life here." The sheriff shook his head. "Your funeral, miss, but don't come crying to town when he shows his true nature." They mounted up, Tom casting one last pleading look at Clara. She met his gaze steadily until he turned away. As they rode off, she heard one mutter, "Whore!" The word hung in the air like a slap. Clara stood frozen, the reality of what she'd chosen crashing over her. Her reputation, her good name, any chance of a respectable life, all gone. "Clara," Eli's voice was rough. "I'm sorry. They had no right. They had every right." Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "It's what everyone will think, what they're probably already saying. Sam Bennett's daughter, living with a man who isn't her husband. They have a word for that." She walked unsteadily to the porch, sinking onto the step. Eli followed, standing awkwardly nearby. "I'll take you back," he said suddenly. "If that's what you want, I'll give your father the supplies anyway. You shouldn't have to bear this shame because of his bargain." Clara looked up at him, this hard man offering to free her at his own expense. "Do you want me to go?" He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "What I want doesn't matter." "It does to me." He turned away, staring at the mountains. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "You've brought something I thought was dead. Light, warmth. The nightmares come less when you're near, but I won't be the cause of your ruin." Clara stood, moved to face him. My reputation was ruined the moment my father made his bargain. At least here. I'm ruined with purpose. She touched his arm gently. I meant what I said. I choose to stay. Even knowing what people will say, what they'll call you. Let them talk. They don't know how you held my hand in the storm. They don't know how gentle you are with the animals, how you carved me a horse, how you've taught me to be strong. Her voice dropped. They don't know who you really are. And you do. I'm beginning to... He caught her hand, held it like something precious. Clara, He struggled, words failing him. I don't know how to be what you deserve. I don't need you to be anything but yourself. That night, the confrontation hung between them like a physical presence. They ate in silence, each lost in thought. When bedtime came, Clara hesitated at his door. The floor's cold tonight, she said simply. He stepped aside, letting her in. They lay carefully apart as always, but the day's events had stripped something raw between them. Tom Hartley, Eli said into the darkness. He's sweet on you? He tried to be, last summer, before the drought got bad. He'd have been a good match, respectable, safe. Clara turned to look at his profile in the moonlight. I don't want safe. What do you want? The question hung there, dangerous and necessary. Clara thought of all the proper answers she could give. Instead, she told the truth. I want to wake up without fear. I want to work beside someone who sees me as a partner, not property. I want to build something real, even if the world calls it shameful. She paused, gathered courage. I want you to stop being afraid of wanting me. His breath caught. In the silver light, she could see his hands clench in the quilts. You don't know what you're asking. Then tell me. He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. I want to touch your hair in the sunlight. I want to hear you laugh without worry. I want to give you everything I couldn't give her, safety, tenderness, a life worth living. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I want to be the man you seem to think I am, instead of the monster everyone knows. Clara reached across the space between them, finding his face in the darkness. His cheek was wet. You're not a monster, Eli Morgan. You're a man who's been hurt, who's done hard things to survive, but underneath all that iron you've wrapped around yourself, your heart still beats. I can feel it. He caught her hand, pressed it harder against his cheek. What if they're right? What if I am too broken, too harsh? What if I hurt you? Then I'll tell you, and we'll find another way. That's what partners do. He turned his face into her palm, and she felt the soft press of his lips there. Not passionate, but reverent, like a prayer. Partners, he repeated, testing the word. Partners, she confirmed. They fell asleep that way, her hand on his face, his hand covering hers. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering the tracks of their unwanted visitors, blanketing the world in clean white silence. Spring came slowly to the highlands, fighting winter for every inch of ground. Clara watched the first green shoots push through melting snow with wonder. Having survived her first Wyoming winter, she and Eli had settled into a rhythm, working side by side, sharing meals, talking by the fire. But underneath ran a current of unspoken longing that grew stronger with each passing day. The change in seasons brought changes to the ranch. Calving season arrived with its endless nights of vigilance. Clara learned to recognize the signs of a difficult birth, to assist when needed, to care for the orphaned calves that required bottle feeding. One afternoon, they were working to free a calf stuck in a muddy ravine. The spring melt had turned the ground treacherous. Clara held the rope while Eli waded in, mud up to his knees. Just as he reached the bawling calf, the bank gave way. Eli! Clara watched in horror as he tumbled, landing hard with the calf on top of him. She slid down the bank without thinking, slipping and sliding until she reached him. He was conscious but winded, the calf's weight pinning his bad leg. Easy, he gasped as she pushed at the animal. Don't hurt yourself." Together they managed to free him. The calf scrambled up the bank to its anxious mother. Eli tried to stand but couldn't put weight on his leg. "Lean on me," Clara said, ducking under his arm. "I'm too heavy." "Hush." They struggled up the muddy bank together, both filthy and exhausted by the time they reached solid ground. Clara helped him to a fallen log, kneeling to examine his leg. "Just twisted," he said, but his face was gray with pain. "We need to get you home." In a moment, he was looking at her strangely. "Clara, you're bleeding." She touched her cheek, finding a scrape from the slide down. "It's nothing." He reached out, thumb gently wiping away the blood. The touch sent lightning through her. They were close, so close, mud splattered and breathing hard, and suddenly the careful distance they'd maintained seemed impossible. "Clara," he whispered. She leaned into his touch. "I'm here." His other hand came up to frame her face. For a heartbeat they hovered there, balanced on the edge of something irreversible. Then his mouth found hers. The kiss was gentle at first, almost hesitant, as if he was afraid she'd pull away. When she didn't, when she leaned closer, her hands finding his shoulders, something broke free in him. He kissed her like a drowning man finding air, desperate and deep. When they finally parted, both were trembling. "I'm sorry," he began, but she pressed fingers to his lips. "Don't apologize, not for that." They made their way back to the cabin in charged silence. Clara tended his leg while he sat rigid, clearly wrestling with himself. When she finished, he caught her wrist. "This changes things. Everything's been changing since I arrived," she pointed out. "Clara, if I... He struggled with the words. "I can't offer you marriage. Not legal marriage. The preacher won't come out here for the likes of me, and I won't subject you to the town's judgment. I know. But if you'll have me, I'll pledge myself to you here and now, before God in these mountains. I'll be your husband in all but law, faithful and true until my last breath." Clara's heart thundered. "And I'll be your wife in all but paper. I'll stand beside you, work with you, make a life with you." She touched his face. "That's more real than many legal marriages I've seen." That evening, they stood together on the porch as the sun set behind the mountains. Eli had found his mother's wedding ring in the wooden box of photographs. "It's not much," he said, sliding it onto her finger. "But it was worn with love for 30 years. It's perfect." Clara admired how the simple gold band caught the dying light. "What do we say? Without a preacher?" Eli took her hands. "I don't know the proper words, but I know this. You've brought me back from darkness. Clara Bennett, I promise to protect you, provide for you, cherish you. I promise to try every day to be the man you deserve." Clara's eyes misted. "And I promise to stand by you, Eli Morgan, in hard times and good, in nightmares and peace. I promise to help you remember gentleness and to never let you disappear into darkness again." They kissed as the first stars appeared, sealing their unconventional union. When they went inside, it was together, to the bed they'd shared for warmth, but would now share as husband and wife in their own understanding. That night was a revelation of tenderness. Eli touched her like she was made of spun glass, reverent and careful. Clara discovered the scars that mapped his body, the lance wound, yes, but others too, a bullet graze on his ribs, knife marks on his back. She kissed each one, accepting all of him. "I don't want to hurt you," he whispered against her hair. "You won't," she assured him. "We'll go slow. We'll learn together." And they did, with patience and wonder, finding their way to a connection deeper than either had imagined possible. Afterward, they lay entwined, Clara's head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I never thought I'd have this," Eli said quietly. "Never thought I deserved it. We both deserve happiness. Eli, we've just had to fight harder for it than most." The following days brought a new ease between them. The careful distance was gone, replaced by casual touches, shared smiles, the comfort of true partnership. They worked the ranch together, planning improvements, dreaming of the future. But their happiness couldn't exist in isolation forever. 2 weeks after their private ceremony, Clara was tending the garden when she saw riders approaching. Her heart sank as she recognized her father among them. Samuel Bennett looked older, grayer, but his eyes were sharp as they found his daughter. With him rode Tom Hartley and another man Clara didn't recognize. Well-dressed, with the look of a town official, Eli emerged from the barn, moving to stand beside Clara. She felt him tense, ready for trouble. "Papa," Clara said quietly. Samuel dismounted slowly. Taking in his daughter's appearance, the simple gold ring on her finger didn't escape his notice. "Clara, you look—" He paused, seeming surprised. "You look well. I am well. This is Mr. Jameson." Samuel indicated the well-dressed man. "He's a lawyer from Cheyenne. Tom here insisted that we should check on your situation." "My situation is fine," Clara said evenly. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Miss Bennett, I've been engaged to investigate whether you're being held against your will. There are concerns about the legitimacy of the arrangement your father made." "The only illegitimate thing was selling his daughter like livestock?" Eli said coldly. Samuel flinched. "I did what I had to do. We were starving." "I understand that, Papa," Clara said. "I don't blame you, but I'm not leaving. You don't have to protect him." Tom burst out. "Whatever he's done to you, whatever hold he has, we can help you." Clara laughed, surprising them all. "The only hold he has is love. Tom, we've pledged ourselves to each other. I'm his wife now, in every way that matters." The silence was deafening. Samuel's face went pale. Tom looked sick. The lawyer shuffled his papers uncomfortably. "Without a legal ceremony," the lawyer began. "We don't need your papers to make our commitment real." Clara interrupted. "We've made our vows before God. That's enough for us." "It's not enough for the law," the lawyer said, "or for decent society. Then we'll live outside your decent society." Eli said, "We've been doing fine so far." Samuel stepped forward. "Clara, please, think about what you're saying. Your mother—" "My mother would understand," Clara said firmly. "She knew what real love looked like. She'd see how Eli treats me, how we've built something good here, and she'd give us her blessing. But your reputation is already ruined in town's eyes. I heard what they called me when Tom and his friends visited. At least here, I'm ruined with dignity and purpose." Samuel studied his daughter, and Clara saw the moment he truly looked at her. Saw her confidence, her health, the way she stood naturally close to Eli, their partnership evident in every small gesture. "You love him?" he asked quietly. "With all my heart." "And he treats you well?" "Better than I ever dreamed." Samuel nodded slowly, then turned to Eli. "I owe you an apology. Morgan, what I did, trading my daughter, it was wrong, born of desperation, but wrong nonetheless." Eli's expression softened slightly. "You saved her life by sending her here, and she saved mine by staying. Maybe it was meant to be." Tom made a disgusted sound. "This is madness! Clara, you're living in sin with a killer." "One more word," Eli said quietly, "and you'll see why they call me that." Clara placed a calming hand on Eli's arm. "Tom, I appreciate that you think you're helping, but I'm happy, truly happy. Please leave us be." The lawyer cleared his throat again. "There is one solution. I'm authorized to perform civil ceremonies. If you truly wish to legitimize this arrangement." Clara and Eli exchanged glances. She saw the question in his eyes and nodded. "We've already made our true vows," Eli said. "But if it will stop people from harassing my wife, we'll say them again for your papers." And so, in the yard of their mountain cabin, with her father and a heartbroken suitor as witnesses, Clara and Eli Morgan were married by law as well as by heart. The ceremony was brief, the lawyer clearly uncomfortable, but the words were spoken and the papers signed. As the visitors prepared to leave, Samuel approached his daughter one last time. "Be happy, Clara. It's all I ever wanted for you." She embraced him, feeling the tremor in his thin frame. "Take care of yourself. Papa, you're welcome here if you need anything." He nodded, mounted his horse, and rode away. Tom left without a word. His dreams finally shattered. The lawyer tipped his hat and followed. Clara and Eli stood together, watching until they disappeared over the ridge. "Regrets?" Eli asked softly. "None." She turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his face. "We were already married in our hearts. Now we're just married on paper, too." He kissed her as the sun climbed higher, bathing their mountain valley in golden light. Inside the cabin, their life together waited, simple, honest, and theirs. That night, as they lay together, Eli traced the gold ring on her finger. "My mother would have liked you," he said. "She always said the strongest women were the ones who looked gentle but had steel underneath. I'd have liked to meet her. She'd have been scandalized by how we started," he admitted with a small smile. "But she'd have come around. She believed in love conquering all obstacles." Wise woman. Clara snuggled closer. "We've conquered quite a few already. With more to come, I'm sure. We'll face them together." "Together," he agreed, and kissed her temple, always together. Outside their window, spring continued its slow transformation of the land, bringing new life to what had seemed dead, hope to what had seemed barren, much like love had done for two lonely souls in a cabin on the mountain. The trouble came on a hot July afternoon, when the grass was brown and the creek ran low. Clara was in the garden, coaxing life from the stubborn soil. When she heard the thunder of approaching horses, too many horses, she straightened, shading her eyes against the sun. 8 riders, moving fast, dust clouding around them like smoke. Her blood ran cold as she recognized the lead figure, Jake Matheson, a man who'd tried to buy Eli's water rights last year and been firmly refused. "Eli," she called, already moving toward the cabin. He emerged from the barn, took one look at the riders, and his face went granite hard. "Get inside. Bar the door. Not without you. Clara, go!" The command in his voice brooked no argument. She ran for the cabin but stopped at the door, unable to leave him facing 8 men alone. She grabbed the shotgun from above the mantel, checking it was loaded. Through the window, she watched Eli stand firm as the riders circled him like wolves. Jake Matheson, heavy-set and cruel-eyed, leaned forward in his saddle. "Morgan, been hearing interesting things about you in town. Got yourself a woman, they say. State your business, Matheson." "My business is water. This drought's killing everyone's stock. That creek of yours is one of the last running strong." Jake smiled, ugly and calculating. "Seems unfair. One man hoarding all that water. I'm not hoarding anything. The creek runs through my legal claim." "Legal?" Jake spat tobacco juice. "That's a funny word coming from a man living in sin. Oh, wait. Heard you got that fixed up recent. Married your bought woman all proper-like." Eli's hand moved subtly toward his gun. "Choose your next words careful, Jake." "Or what? You'll kill me like you killed those rustlers? Add another notch to your reputation." Jake's smile widened. "See, that's the problem. Morgan, you've gotten soft. Man with a woman has something to lose. Makes him vulnerable." One of Jake's men had dismounted, was moving toward the cabin. Clara's hands tightened on the shotgun. "Your fight's with me," Eli said. But there was something new in his voice. Fear. Not for himself, for her. "Everything's part of the fight," Jake replied. "That's what you never understood. Why you've been sitting up here alone all these years while smart men like me built real power." The man approaching the cabin tried the door, finding it barred. He peered through the window, directly into the barrel of Clara's shotgun. "I'd step back if I were you," she said clearly. The man froze. Jake's attention swiveled to the cabin. Well, the little woman's got teeth." He nodded to his man. "Break it down." "Try it." Clara pumped the shotgun for emphasis. "I've gotten real good at shooting wolves that threaten what's mine." For a moment, everything balanced on a knife's edge. Then Eli moved. Fluid, despite his bad leg. his gun clearing leather faster than thought. The shot knocked the hat off the man at Clara's window, sending him scrambling back. "Next one won't be a warning," Eli said quietly. "Any man who threatens my wife dies. That's not a boast. Jake, that's a promise." Jake's men shifted nervously. They'd come expecting to intimidate one man weakened by domesticity. They hadn't counted on facing the old Eli Morgan, the one who'd survived Comanche attacks and killed without hesitation. "You can't watch her every moment," Jake said. But his bravado had cracked. "Can't protect her from everything. I can try. And if anything happens to her, anything, I'll burn your ranch to the ground and salt the earth where it stood. You know I can. You know I will." Something in Eli's voice, that flat, deadly certainty, made Jake's men pull back. They'd pushed far enough to see the wolf was still there under the shepherd's clothing. Jake gathered his reins. "This isn't over, Morgan. That water's too valuable to leave in the hands of one man, especially one who's gone soft over a woman. The only thing soft here is your spine. Jake, now get off my land before I forget my wife prefers me peaceable." They rode away in a cloud of dust and threats, but Clara didn't lower the shotgun until they disappeared over the ridge. Only then did her hand start shaking. Eli was beside her in an instant, taking the gun, pulling her into his arms. "You did good, real good. They'll be back. Maybe not. Jake likes easy targets. We just showed him we're not that." But Clara could feel the tension in his body, the worry he was trying to hide. That night, he checked and rechecked the locks, cleaned every weapon they owned, stood long watches at the window. "Come to bed," Clara urged past midnight. "Can't. Need to keep watch." She moved behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "They won't come at night. Jake's a coward. He only fights when he's sure he'll win. I should have killed him. Years ago, when he first started sniffing around. Should have ended it then. You're not that man anymore, aren't I?" He turned in her arms, and she saw anguish in his eyes. "Today, when they threatened you, I would have killed them all. Clara, without hesitation, without mercy. What kind of husband does that make me? The kind who protects what he loves." She reached up to touch his face. "I don't want you to be toothless. Eli, I fell in love with your strength as much as your gentleness. I just want you to know when to use which." He searched her eyes. "You're not afraid of what I might do. I'm afraid of what might happen if you don't do it. Those men meant harm. You stood between them and me. That doesn't make you a monster. It makes you mine." He crushed her to him then, his face buried in her hair. "I can't lose you, can't go back to the darkness. You won't. We won't let them win." She pulled back to meet his eyes. "But we need to be smart. We can't fight them alone forever." The next morning, Clara insisted they ride to their nearest neighbor, Ben Crawford, whose ranch lay 15 miles east. The old rancher listened grimly to their tale. "Jake's been pushing folks all along the valley," Ben confirmed. "Buying out those he can, forcing out those he can't. You're not the first he's threatened." "Then maybe it's time we stopped facing him alone," Clara suggested. Ben's weathered face creased in thought. Alliance, you mean? Neighbors standing together?" "Exactly. He's counting on picking us off one by one. But together we might have a chance." Ben nodded slowly. "I'll talk to the others. If Jake wants a fight, maybe it's time we gave him one." Over the following weeks, a quiet resistance formed. Ranchers who'd been isolated began meeting, planning, watching each other's backs. Jake's men found themselves outnumbered whenever they tried their intimidation tactics. But Jake wasn't finished. Clara woke one night to the smell of smoke. "Eli!" He was already up, pulling on boots. Through the window, they could see orange flames licking at the barn. "Stay here," he ordered, grabbing a bucket. "Like hell." Clara was right behind him as they ran outside. The barn was fully engulfed, beyond saving, but the animals, Clara's heart clenched. The horses were screaming, trapped inside. Without thinking, she ran for the barn door. Eli caught her, spinning her back. "It's too late! Buttercup's in there!" The gentle mare who'd been her first friend on the ranch, who'd carried her faithfully through that first hard winter. Eli looked at the inferno, at his wife's anguished face, and made a choice that would have been inconceivable a year ago. He grabbed a blanket, dunked it in the water trough, and wrapped it around himself. Eli, no! But he was already plunging through the smoke. Clara stood frozen, watching the doorway he'd disappeared through, counting heartbeats. 5, 10, 20. Then, a crash from inside, and Eli emerged, leading Buttercup and their other horse, his clothes smoking, skin reddened from heat. Clara threw the remaining water on him, then wrapped him in her arms, not caring about the soot and burns. "You fool! You brave, wonderful fool! Couldn't let you lose her," he gasped. "Know what she means to you." They fought the fires spread to other buildings through the night, joined eventually by Ben Crawford and 3 other neighbors who'd seen the smoke. By dawn, the barn was ash, but the house and Eli still stood. "This was Jake," one of the neighbors said grimly. "Can't prove it," Ben pointed out. "No witnesses." "Don't need proof," Eli said quietly. He stood silhouetted against the smoking ruins, looking like the dangerous man he'd once been. "He wants a war. He's got one." "Eli," Clara warned, but he shook his head. "No, I tried it your way. Tried being civilized, but men like Jake only understand one thing." He looked at each man present. "I'm riding to town tomorrow. Going to have a conversation with Jake Matheson. Anyone wants to come. I won't turn down the help, but I'm going either way." The men exchanged glances, then, one by one, nodded. They'd been pushed far enough. Clara caught Eli's arm as the others dispersed. "You're not going alone. I'm coming with you. Clara, partners, remember, in everything." Her chin lifted stubbornly. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you come home." He cupped her soot-stained face in his hands. "How did I get so lucky? Finding you. Maybe we found each other." She turned to look at the ruins of their barn. "We'll rebuild, better than before. After we deal with Jake." "After we deal with Jake," she agreed. Together. He kissed her forehead, tasting ash and determination. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, possibly violence. But tonight, they were together, alive, and stronger for having something worth fighting for. In the distance, thunder rumbled, the promise of rain after so much drought. Change was coming to the valley, one way or another. The confrontation with Jake Matheson never came. When Eli and the coalition of ranchers rode into Cedar Falls the next morning, they found the sheriff's office in chaos. Jake's body had been discovered at dawn, shot twice in the back on the road outside town. "Don't look at me like that, Morgan," Sheriff Daniels said wearily. "You were home with witnesses when it happened. Half the valley saw your barn burning." "Who then?" Ben Crawford asked. The sheriff shrugged. "Jake made a lot of enemies. Could have been anyone. His men scattered like quail soon as they heard, probably halfway to Mexico by now." Clara felt no satisfaction in the man's death, only a hollow relief. The threat was gone, but the violence she'd hoped to avoid had claimed its due anyway. As they prepared to leave town, she noticed Eli had stopped at the general store. He emerged with a letter in his hand, his face unreadable. "What is it?" she asked once they were away from curious ears. "Your father. He's been writing to the store, asking them to hold letters for you." He handed her the envelope. "This is the 3rd one. They said—" Clara read quickly, her heart sinking with each line. Samuel Bennett was ill, had been since winter. The neighbors were helping, but he was asking for his daughter. "I have to go to him," she said. "We'll leave tomorrow." Eli replied without hesitation. But the ranch? Ben can watch the stock for a week or 2. You're not going alone." They made the journey to Cedar Falls in 2 days, pushing hard. Clara barely recognized the man in the narrow bed. Her father had wasted away to skin and bones. His breathing labored. Clara, his eyes, still sharp despite the illness, found her immediately. "You came." "Of course I came." She took his cold hand, fighting tears. "Why didn't you send word sooner?" "Didn't want to burden you. Knew you had your own life now." His gaze moved to Eli, standing quietly by the door. "Morgan? Sir, you've been good to her?" "I've tried. Can see it in her face. She's blooming." Samuel squeezed Clara's hand weakly. "Your mother would be glad. She always said the strongest flowers grow in the hardest ground." For 3 days, Clara tended her father while Eli helped the neighbors with the neglected farm work. Samuel's moments of clarity came and went like clouds across the sun. On the 3rd night, he gripped Clara's hand with surprising strength. "Need to tell you something. About your mother." "Papa, you should rest." "No, need you to know." He struggled to sit up. "She wasn't born to this life. Came from money back east. Good family. Could have married anyone." Clara had heard pieces of this before, but let him continue. "Her father forbade our match. Said I was beneath her, but she chose me anyway." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Ran away in the middle of the night. Left everything behind for love. I know, Papa. Do you? Do you understand what I'm saying?" His eyes bored into hers. "She chose hard love over easy comfort. Never regretted it, even at the end. Said our life was real in a way her old one never was." Clara's throat tightened. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I need you to forgive me. For the bargain I made. I was desperate, yes, but also—" He paused, gathering strength. "I looked at Morgan that day in town. Saw something in him. Same thing your mother saw in me. Maybe a hard man who might turn soft for the right woman. Papa, am I wrong? Are you unhappy?" Clara glanced at Eli, who had appeared in the doorway. "No, I'm happier than I ever imagined. Then maybe I did right after all." Samuel's breathing grew more labored. "One more thing. In my trunk, your mother's things, meant for you." He slipped away peacefully just before dawn, with Clara holding one hand and, to her surprise, Eli holding the other. The funeral was small. The drought and hardship had driven many away, but those who remained spoke kindly of Samuel Bennett, remembering his determination and his devotion to his daughter. Afterward, Clara opened the trunk. Inside were treasures she'd never known existed. Her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved, a string of pearls, letters tied with ribbon, and at the bottom, a daguerreotype of her mother as a young woman, wearing a ball gown, surrounded by luxury. "She really did give up everything," Clara murmured. "For love," Eli said quietly. "Seems to run in the family." Clara leaned into him. "What do we do about the homestead?" "Whatever you want. It's yours now." She thought about it as they stood in the empty cabin where she'd grown up. "I want to go home, to our mountain, but maybe we could use this place too. Let a young family sharecrop it, like Papa should have done years ago instead of trying to manage alone. Ben's oldest son is looking for a start," Eli suggested. "Good kid, reliable. That would be perfect." Clara took a last look around. Papa would like knowing the land was still being worked. They stayed another week to arrange matters. And in that time, Clara noticed a change in how the townspeople treated them. The scandal of their beginning had faded, replaced by respect for how they'd stood against Jake Matheson, how they'd come when Samuel needed them. Mrs. Martinez pulled Clara aside after the funeral. "You've grown strong. Mija, your mother would be proud." Even Tom Hartley, married now to the baker's daughter, offered awkward condolences. "You were right," he admitted quietly, "about choosing your own path. I'm sorry I didn't understand." The young preacher who'd conducted the funeral sought them out before they left. "I hear you were married by a judge," he said. "But if you'd ever like a church blessing, I'd be honored. What God has joined, no man should tear asunder, however that joining came about." Clara looked at Eli, saw him weighing the offer. He'd avoided churches since the war. "But for her, we'll think about it," he said finally. "Thank you." The journey home was bittersweet. Clara grieved her father, but felt a sense of completion too. The past was truly past now. As they crested the final ridge and saw their valley spread below, her heart lifted. The summer rains had finally come, turning the brown grass green. They could see Ben's son already at work on the burned barn's foundation. "Welcome home, Mrs. Morgan," Eli said softly. "It's good to be back." She studied their domain, the cabin solid against its cliff, the meadow where cattle grazed, the creek running strong. "We should expand the garden, maybe add another room to the cabin." "Oh," she smiled, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "I think we'll be needing it come spring." Eli went absolutely still. "Clara, are you—" "The doctor in town confirmed it while you were helping with the harvest, about 2 months along." Wonder dawned in his eyes, followed quickly by fear. "The frontier's no place for— I don't know how to be a father. What if—" "Shh." She pressed fingers to his lips. "You'll learn. We both will. Together. Like everything else." He pulled her against him, holding her like spun glass. "A baby. Our baby. Our baby," she confirmed. "Born to this land, to our life, strong from the start." They sat there on the ridge for a long moment, watching the sun paint their valley gold. So much had changed since that day Clara arrived. Frightened and alone, the arranged marriage born of desperation had become a true partnership. The harsh rancher had remembered how to be gentle. The sheltered girl had found her strength. "No regrets?" Eli asked, echoing his question from months before. Clara thought of her mother, giving up silk for calico, choosing love over comfort, of her father, making an impossible choice that had somehow led to happiness, of herself, traded like property but finding freedom in the transaction. "None," she said firmly. "This is where I belong." As they rode down into their valley, toward their home and their future, Clara felt her mother's spirit riding with them, another Eastern woman who'd chosen Western love, who'd known that the hardest ground often yielded the strongest roots. The cabin door stood open in welcome, afternoon light spilling across the threshold. Together, they crossed it, ready for whatever came next, the foundation they'd built, first in necessity, then in trust, finally in love, would hold against any storm. In her belly, new life quickened, the future taking shape with each passing day. Clara placed her hand there, feeling the promise of it, while Eli's hand covered hers. "Home," he said simply. "Home," she agreed, and knew she'd never had a finer one. Spring arrived with a fury of life. The mountain meadow exploded in wildflowers, Indian paintbrush, columbine, and prairie roses. Clara moved slowly now, her belly round with child, but she still insisted on planting the expanded garden she'd planned. "You should be resting," Eli fretted, watching her kneel carefully between the rows. "Movement is good for the baby," she assured him, patting the soil around young tomato plants. "Besides, these hands weren't made for idleness." He'd become increasingly protective as her time drew near, barely letting her lift anything heavier than a dish. It both amused and touched her, this dangerous man made anxious by impending fatherhood. The new barn stood complete, raised with the help of their neighbors in a day of communal work. The old isolation of the Morgan Ranch had ended. Where once Eli had been the hermit on the mountain, now their home served as a gathering place for the small community of ranchers. "Never thought I'd see the day," Ben Crawford had said, watching Eli laugh at something one of the other men said. "Eli Morgan, social as a church picnic." Clara smiled at the memory as she finished the last row. Standing was getting harder these days, and she accepted Eli's quick assistance without protest. "Letter came while you were working," he said, producing an envelope. "From back east." Clara recognized the elegant handwriting immediately. Her mother's sister, Aunt Catherine, whom she'd written after her father's death. She opened it with trembling hands. The contents made her sink onto the porch bench. "She wants to visit, says she's sorry for how the family treated Mama, for never writing after she left. She's offering to help with the baby." Eli sat beside her. "What do you want?" "I don't know. Part of me wants that connection to Mama, but what if she looks at our life and sees only hardship? Then she'd be a fool." He took her hand. "But it's your choice. Family is complicated." Clara thought of her mother, choosing love over family approval, of herself, finding family in unexpected places. "I'll write back. Invite her for summer. If she truly wants to understand Mama's choice, she should see what that choice built. As April turned to May, other preparations occupied them. Mrs. Martinez had agreed to come stay when Clara's time came, bringing her knowledge of midwifery. The small room they'd added to the cabin stood ready. Eli had built a beautiful cradle, carved with running horses like the one he'd given Clara that first winter. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset paint the mountains purple, Clara felt the first pain. She gripped Eli's hand, excitement and fear warring in her chest. "Is it?" "I think so." Another wave rolled through her. "You should get Mrs. Martinez." What followed was the longest night of both their lives. Clara had helped with birthings before, calves, foals, even attending a neighbor woman, but experiencing it herself was altogether different. The pains came in waves, each stronger than the last. Eli refused to be banished to the porch, as was customary. "I've faced Comanche warriors and rabid wolves," he told Mrs. Martinez firmly. "I'm not leaving my wife." He stayed by Clara's side through it all, letting her grip his hand hard enough to leave bruises, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement when she thought she couldn't continue. "You're the strongest woman I know," he whispered during a brief respite. "You tamed me, didn't you? This is nothing compared to that." She laughed, despite the pain. "You weren't half so stubborn as this baby." As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the world in shades of gold and rose, a new cry joined the sounds of morning. Clara collapsed back, exhausted but triumphant, as Mrs. Martinez placed a squalling bundle in her arms. "A daughter," the older woman announced, beaming. "Perfect as a spring morning." Clara looked down at the tiny face, already seeing traces of Eli in the determined chin, herself in the delicate nose. "Hello, little one." Eli sat frozen, staring at the baby as if she might disappear. "Can I?" "Of course." Clara transferred the precious bundle to his large, scarred hands. The transformation in his face was something she'd remember forever. Wonder, terror, and a love so fierce it took her breath away. "She's so small," he whispered. "So perfect. How did we make something so perfect? What should we name her?" Clara asked. Eli was quiet for a long moment, studying their daughter's face. "Sarah Catherine," he said finally. "After your mother and mine, two strong women who chose love over ease." "Sarah Catherine Morgan," Clara agreed, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Our mountain wildflower." The baby opened her eyes then, gray like her father's but already holding her mother's warmth, and seemed to look right at them, as if to say she approved. In the days that followed, they learned the rhythms of new parenthood. Eli, who'd faced down gunmen without flinching, was reduced to nervous hovering by a tiny girl who fit in the crook of his arm. Clara had never loved him more than when she found him in the rocking chair at dawn, singing soft Tennessee lullabies to their daughter. Aunt Catherine arrived in June, stepping down from Jeb Tucker's wagon in traveling clothes that looked absurdly out of place against the mountain backdrop. She was older than Clara's mother would have been, her hair silver, her bearing still elegant despite the dusty journey. Clara met her at the door, Sarah sleeping in her arms. For a moment, aunt and niece simply looked at each other, decades of silence hanging between them. "You look like her," Catherine said finally, her voice thick, just like Anna when she was young. "Would you like to hold your grandniece?" Catherine's composed mask cracked. "Oh, my dear girl, yes, I would." Over the following weeks, Catherine integrated into their life with surprising ease. She helped with the baby, shared stories of Clara's mother as a girl, and slowly came to understand the choice her sister had made. "I was wrong," she admitted one evening. Watching Eli gently burp Sarah while Clara finished dinner, "I thought Anna was throwing her life away, but she was building something real." She stayed a month, long enough to see the community gather for Sarah's informal blessing. The young preacher came up from town. Neighbors brought food and gifts, and even some of the Shoshone from the Northern Valley came to pay respects to the man who'd always traded fairly with them. "This isn't what I expected," Catherine confessed as she prepared to leave. "But it's more than I hoped. Anna would be so proud. Clara, of the life you've built, the man you've chosen, the community you've created." She left them with a generous gift, money from Clara's grandfather's estate, finally released. For Sarah's education, she insisted. So she has choices, like her grandmother did. As summer deepened, life settled into new patterns. Clara worked in the garden with Sarah sleeping in a basket beside her. Eli expanded their holdings, adding more cattle, breaking ground for additional crops. The mountain ranch prospered as never before, but it was the quiet moments Clara treasured most. Eli reading aloud by firelight while she nursed Sarah, the three of them lying in the meadow, teaching their daughter the names of clouds. Sarah's first laugh, which reduced her formidable father to tears of joy. One evening, as autumn touched the aspens with gold, Clara stood on the porch watching Eli show Sarah the horses. At 6 months, she was bright-eyed and curious, reaching for everything with chubby hands. Eli's patience with her was infinite, his gentleness absolute. "See, Buttercup," he was saying, "your mama rode her when she first came here, brave as anything, both of them." Clara thought back to that scared girl arriving in a stranger's wagon, to the hard man who'd greeted her with cold eyes and colder words. Neither of them existed anymore, transformed by love and trust into something altogether new. "What are you thinking?" Eli asked, joining her on the porch with Sarah babbling in his arms. "About how far we've come, how different everything is from that first day." Regrets. It was their old question, their touchstone. "Never." She leaned into him, one hand on Sarah's soft hair. "This is the life I was meant to live." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting their valley in shades of amber and rose, the Morgan family stood together on their porch. The cabin that had once housed loneliness now rang with laughter. The land that had seemed so harsh now bloomed with abundance, and two people who'd thought themselves beyond love had created a life richer than any fortune. Sarah gurgled happily, reaching for her mother. Clara took her, breathing in the sweet baby scent, feeling Eli's arms come around them both. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, teething and tantrums, drought and plenty, the endless dance of life on the frontier. But tonight, in this golden moment, they were complete. A family forged in hardship, tested by trials, and bound by choice. The arranged marriage had become a love story. The virgin bride had become a frontier woman. The harsh rancher had remembered how to hope. And in the years to come, when Sarah asked how her parents met, they would tell her the truth, that sometimes the hardest beginnings lead to the happiest endings, that love can bloom in the rockiest soil, and that two people brave enough to trust can build something beautiful even in the wilderness. The stars emerged one by one above the mountains, ancient witnesses to another chapter in the endless story of the West. Inside the cabin, lamplight glowed warm against the coming night, and the Morgan family settled in for another evening together, ordinary in its peace, extraordinary in its joy. Thank you for listening to this tale from the Wild West. I'd love to hear where you're enjoying this story, whether you're listening during your commute, relaxing at home, or perhaps even out on the range yourself. Please subscribe to Wild West Campfire and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories and reactions make our campfire community special.